Hi everyone, and welcome to my channel. I am the Christian Feminist. In Christian communities, there is an ongoing debate whether or not critical race theory, also known as CRT, is a threat to the gospel of Christ. You may have heard many conservative Christians complain that they are being forced to accept a woke liberal agenda concerning racism and sexism in the United States, and thus CRT is just a part of that woke liberal agenda. However, there are also many Christians who don't think the church has adequately addressed the sins of racism and sexism, and thus are open to accepting CRT as a solution to help combat those sins without compromising their faith. As Christians, we can all agree that all humans are equal in dignity and rights, as we all bear God's image. And that dignity and right include human flourishing. Human flourishing is the goal to living the ideal Christian life. And oppression, marginalization, and discrimination against women of color prevent human flourishing. One of the objections of CRT, often heard in Christian circles, is against the framework of intersectionality. You may have heard intersectionality creates divisions and puts all white males into the category of oppressors. In this video, I will make a case that CRT is not a threat at all to the gospel of Christ. And by using the framework of intersectionality, drawing from bell hooks and feminist theory from margin to center, and Kimberly Crenshaw, and mapping the margins, intersectionality, identity politics, and violence against women of color, I will show that feminist theory and critical race theory, more specifically intersectionality feminism, can be embraced to help promote human flourishing by combating oppression, marginalization, and discrimination against women of color. First, let Kimberly Crenshaw, who is the co-founder of CRT and who coined the phrase intersectionality, define intersectionality for us.
Intersectionality is basically the idea that we experience life, sometimes discrimination, sometimes benefits, based on a number of different identities that we have. The basic term came out of a case where I was looking at black women who were being discriminated against, not just as black people, not just as women, but as black women. So intersectionality was basically a metaphor to say, well, they've got race discrimination that they're facing coming from one direction, they've got gender discrimination coming from another direction, and they're colliding in their lives in ways that we don't really anticipate and understand. So intersectionality is basically meant to help people think about the fact that discrimination can happen on the basis of several different factors at the same time. And we need to have a language and ability to see it in order to address it.
That doesn't sound like the straw man that says intersectionality believes all white males are oppressors. CRT is strawman based on the fact that Christians have a strong aversion to Marxism, and if CRT can be made into a Marxist framework, then it becomes an easier target to knock down in the Christian community. CRT scholars don't really write about Marx or Marxism, so I don't think this objection can hold up for the anti-CRT crowd. Usually, when you hear that critical race theorists teach that all white people are oppressors, this is an assertion made by political commentators who are seeking to construct a parity between CRT and Marxism. CRT critiques systems and structures. It does not deal with personal morality. It does not teach that all white people are oppressors. Another objection to Christians who embrace CRT as a solution to racism and sexism do not have a sound understanding of women's role in the Bible. First of all, there is no hierarchy or patriarchy in this kingdom. Authority is based in the gifts of the Holy Spirit, not from men. There are scriptures often taken out of context in order to silence women. When a woman is told to be silent or don't teach men in the New Testament, it is because she has violated the rule of no hierarchy in marriage or in church. It is not because she is forbidden to exercise her gift of teaching or preaching. Exercising of the gifts flourishes the diversity and mutuality of the leadership in this kingdom, reflecting our triune God. Intersectionality implies knocking down hierarchies. It is totally in compliance with the Bible. Therefore, we can embrace intersectionality to help us combat the sins of racism and sexism. The great late Bell Hooks was a feminist scholar slash activist who was known for her writings on race, gender, and class. In her book published in 1984, Feminist Theory from Margin to Center, she discusses how women of color and poor women were initially left out of the contemporary feminist movement. The contemporary feminist movement was one dimensional and only addressed the problems that white, wealthy, middle class women encountered. Hook says, past feminists refused to draw attention to and attack racial hierarchies, suppressed the link between race and class. Class structure in American society has been shaped by the racial politic of white supremacy. It is only by analyzing racism in its function and capitalist society that a thorough understanding of class relationships can emerge. Class struggle is inextricably bound to the struggle to end racism. Hooks makes a great case for intersectionality as she demonstrated how the plight of non white women and poor white women in America were being ignored. No one was addressing their problems, they were being dehumanized. Intersectionality gives the oppressed hope that can transform into human flourishing. Next, Kimberly Crenshaw and Mapping the Margins of Intersectionality, Identity Politics, and Violence Against Women of Color, published in 1991, brought awareness to the violence that women of color experience. She demonstrates how race and gender intersect and shaping structural, political, and representational aspects of violence against women of color. Crenshaw says, there is also a general tendency within anti-racist discourse to regard the problem of violence against women of color as just another manifestation of racism. In this sense, the relevance of gender domination within the community is reconfigured as a consequence of discrimination against men. Of course, it is probably true that racism contributes to the cycle of violence, given the stress that men of color experience in dominant society. It is therefore more than reasonable to explore the links between racism and domestic violence. Yet, the chain of violence is more complex and extends beyond this single link. Racism is linked to patriarchy to the extent that racism denies men of color the power and privilege that dominant men enjoy. Intersectionality allows us to see the links of various sins, especially of dehumanization, which is contrary to human flourishing. The Christian virtue tradition emphasizes human flourishing. When you don't recognize humans' dignity, you are dehumanizing them. We see dehumanizing in various systems in the United States, especially in the court system. These systems are stripping humans of their value, which in turn prevents human flourishing. We are called to participate in human flourishing. I argue that intersectionality feminism can contribute to human flourishing. Once again, I am the Christian feminist. I challenge all humans to stop dehumanizing each other. We are all image bearers.